A new dragon hero, you say? Oh boy, I really wonder what her targeting is like. Just shoot him, goddammit! Hi, I'm Holland, and this is a review of the Ancient Hunger expansion for Kingdom Rush Alliance. But more than that, it's a deeper look at Alliance's underlying design philosophy. When I went back to play this expansion, I experienced a great deal of cognitive dissonance. On the one hand, I really enjoyed all of the new content. But on the other, there was this feeling in the back of my mind that I just couldn't shake, that somehow, despite what I've said previously about Alliance, the game is going down a bad path. So get ready for a very strange kind of review, one that's almost exclusively focused on how good this update is, while at the same time pointing out a problem that, if left unaddressed, might eventually kill the franchise. I really do hope you enjoy. Ancient Hunger expands the southern part of the map, revealing a swamp that was once under the control of the Arboreans, but which now has been reclaimed by the savage Crocs. Our goal is to fight our way through the bog to stop a huge beast from breaking free from capture and ravaging Lineria. The expansion includes 3 new stages, the first of which depicts an area still partly under Arborean control. Because of this, we get to interact with 3 new building types. One rolls a huge log down the path for a price, naturally. Another summons bees to throw sticky honey at the enemy. When purchased, he'll remain for the entire level. And the third summons 3 Arborean warriors to walk down the path. Having 3 different special buildings on a single stage is pretty cool, even if I do wonder why the Arborean citizen's hut can be destroyed while the other buildings cannot. I didn't find the soldiers too useful anyway, as they don't respawn, so I'm confused as to why the building needed a health bar. That aside, the level looks pretty and functions as a solid introduction to the expansion. In the second stage, we have fully entered the swamp, and it's definitely my favorite new level. I love the uniqueness of the murky bog habitat, and the layout feels new and refreshing. Especially because it has 3 exits and is flooded by swamp water. Swamp water doesn't appear in the first stage and only barely does in the third, which means this level is the only one where you really get to play with the mechanic. A shame, because it introduces a fun level of ambiguity as to how screwed you are at any moment. I could never really remember what was in the water at a given time, and instead had to try to calculate whether my defenses on each path were sufficient to deal with the incoming threat. This level is wonderfully designed, both in terms of looks and gameplay, and it's a joy to try to overcome. In the third and final level, and damn I wish these expansions had more levels, we face the threat lurking at the center of the swamp. A huge crocodile demigod chained to a wall. I was pretty disappointed in Navira from the first Alliance expansion, but I'm glad to report that whoever worked on this boss knew what they were doing. Abominor not only looks great, but he also has some wonderful attacks, summoning enemies to the path, firing projectiles and devouring towers, the last of which he does throughout the entire level. In addition to that, he has 2 distinct phases, and when he arrives, the layout of the entire map changes. My only real complaint is that the level goes on for about 25 minutes, which is a bit too long for my taste. But overall, I think Ironhide did a great job with this boss. Apart from the boss, the update also includes 10 new enemies, all of which, apart from one, are crocodile themed. What the enemy design of Ancient Hunger reminded me of immediately was that of the shark minions from Pirate Kings. That is, each croc is very distinctly color-coded. The regular gator is light green. His stronger counterpart is dark green. The winged croc is red, the lizard shot is yellow, the quickfeet is light blue, the wise croc is brown, and so on. While the remaining 4 enemies do have overlapping colors, their textures are so different that they're still easy to tell apart. So this is a good thing, right? Color coding the enemies? Well, for gameplay purposes, it's wonderful, but it also has the side effect of making them look even more cartoonish than they already do. I'll touch more on that later though. The enemies are super fun to go up against. Some of them have really specific counters that you have to learn, which is great. For example, the quickfeet must be kept away from the gators or they'll be turned into killer tiles. The winged crocs need to be shot down quickly by a tower that can target flying enemies and has a rapid firing rate. The wise croc has high magic resistance and, due to his stun, is a detriment to regular attacking towers. He's most effectively dealt with through other means such as with barracks or heroes. And my favorite, the nesting gator has to be killed quickly or he'll completely overwhelm the stage with croc eggs. I had this happen to me on the 3rd stage, and it was almost nostalgic to see that many enemies charging down a single lane. The new hero is Sylvara, and yes, it's another dragon, but Sylvara is not like other dragons. She flies around in an upright pose and controls slightly differently. She has a short acceleration and deceleration period when moved. Her abilities are cool. This one is no doubt a Plants vs Zombies reference, and the hero spell powers her up, which is fun, especially because it increases her movement speed, which can be used tactically for repositioning. I don't have too much else to say about her. As I noted in the intro, she still has some issues with targeting, just like other dragons. I love the look of the tower. If there is one place Ironhide basically never fails, it's with their tower designs. The Bog Hermit is a giant magical toad that spits out orbs of arcane energy. What makes him interesting is the fact that he can switch between dealing magical and physical damage with his attacks. The magical attack can also hit flying enemies, while the physical attack creates a lasting area of effect that slows enemies. I love that Ironhide is starting to give each tower more interactivity, and I wholeheartedly encourage them to keep adding these toggleable options. Lastly, although the animation work for the Bog Hermit's final 2 abilities was pretty awesome, I didn't find the abilities themselves too exciting. I think that's okay though, because the option to toggle between 2 types of attack makes the tower plenty interesting by itself. Jesus Christ. Hey, that all sounds pretty good, Holland. So what's this fuss about Kingdom Rush going down the wrong path? Aren't you being a bit hyperbolic? Well, let me try to explain. I think Ironhide is doing a good job within a bad framework. Since Vengeance, Kingdom Rush has moved in a direction of patronizing child-friendliness, both in terms of visual design, story, and gameplay, and I am not a fan. I'll be the first to admit that Kingdom Rush wasn't made for adults. Although we can get some enjoyment out of the difficulty, I think the early games were meant to challenge the younger generations and invoke their puzzle-solving abilities. And, well, this is exactly the point. Kingdom Rush has shied away from challenging its players. It's either trying to tailor to an even younger audience, or Ironhide has been captured by a belief that players have gotten dumber. I don't need the entire first level to be an unnecessarily patronizing tutorial. Just let me play. The first few games did a wonderful job of teaching the player. Why ruin it by putting in this stupid tutorial sequence? You might say, well, Holland, that's because you're an adult. Let the kids have their damn tutorial level. And I say, that's crap. Because I first played these games when I was a kid, and I did just fine without the excessive handholding. I doubt these kinds of tutorials even work. You've got to let the player find out what to do by themselves with as little help as possible, rather than forcing them to place a specific tower in a specific place. But it's not just the gameplay that suffers from this infantilizing behavior. The visuals have gotten more cartoony as well. The new games shy away from gore, and rather than Abomination and Executioner, we now have Human Shark and Blue Frog. Listen, I'm not trying to sound like an edgy teenager who only wants to see enemies that could also fit into a horror movie. Something like the Nyan or Velociraptor from Vengeance are great, and I don't think they suffer from the cartoonifying nature of the later titles. But I think it is a huge step from a pack of velociraptors controlled by dwarves to a race of silly-looking crocodiles. And maybe I can't draw the line in the sand exactly where the enemies become too silly, but somewhere Ironhide went too far. And I'm disappointed that the games went from light-hearted fantasy that could take itself seriously to outright children's cartoons. So ask yourself this: do you think the first Kingdom Rush is too hard for a young child to play? Or is it maybe just hard enough to where they might get stuck and have to expend some effort getting through the level, overcoming an obstacle and learning something from it, rather than holding their hand the entire way so there's no chance they'll ever fail? Were the first games less accessible to preteens, or were they just less patronizing? I am sorry for being so direct. I can only imagine the Kingdom Rush developers are still really passionate about the games and doing their best to make great expansions. And there are bits and pieces of the last few updates that make me feel like I'm still being challenged as a player. In terms of enemy design, for example, we still get gems like the Corrupted Stalker and Dust Cryptid. And adding targeting options to towers like the Twilight Longbows and Bog Hermit, as well as making more complex abilities like Thrill of the Hunt, is great. It feels exciting and new, but more than that, it feels like a challenge that I as the player have to overcome, understanding these tower and enemy mechanics. And that's fun, more of that. Most children aren't stupid, they're gonna get it too if you let them fail a bit first. I enjoyed my time with Ancient Hunger. It had a cool new tower, an original hero with fun abilities, enemies that posed a real challenge, and a great second stage. But I don't feel immersed into the world of Lenaria like I used to. It all feels too much like a bad children's TV show where the villain inevitably gets turned into a handbag at the end and there was no real threat all along. You can have a light-hearted fantasy world and still take yourself seriously. You did it right the first 3 times, Ironhide. I hope you don't forget that. Thank you so much for watching. I know this video wasn't only about the expansion, but I felt more deeply inspired to talk about this other issue, and I think it made sense to slot into this video. Also, I feel absolutely no ill will toward anyone at Ironhide. I think they're doing a very fine job, but sometimes it's just nice with an outsider's perspective. Okay, that's enough from me. Have a wonderful day. Bye!